What would you think if you planted a sunflower seed and it grew into an oak tree? You would probably be very surprised. Of course, that would never actually happen. You know that sunflower seeds grow into sunflower plants. Oak tree seeds or acorns grow into oak trees. This is an example of a consistent and observable pattern in nature. Offspring look similar to their parents. A key assumption of science is the idea that natural systems have consistent, observable, and measurable patterns. These patterns and events happen in the same way today as they did in the past. Organisms reproduce today just as they did in the past. In fact, organisms must reproduce or else life would no longer exist. We know that the offspring of sunflowers look similar to sunflowers, not oak trees. And the offsprings of elephants look similar to elephants, not zebras. Offspring look similar to their parents because heritable traits are passed down from generation to generation. These heritable traits are encoded in genetic material called DNA. Genetic material is passed from generation to generation through the same processes today as it was in the past. Evolution is the process of biological change by which populations become different in their ancestors over many generations. Differences develop in populations due to changes in the genetic material of individuals and the genetic makeup of populations. These changes build up over time, so the more recently two species shared a common ancestor, the more closely related those species are to each other. Common ancestry is the idea that all organisms share a common ancestral species from which they evolved at some point in the past. Whales and fish have similar body shapes. However, they are not closely related. Whales share a more recent common ancestor with land animals than they do fish. In fact, whales' closest living relatives are hippos. Whales are very different from fish. They have lungs, nourish developing young inside the female's body, and produce milk. These characteristics are different from those of fish, but they are shared with mammals such as hippos. Scientists learn about evolutionary relationships in many ways. They use a variety of evidence, including fossil evidence. They also analyze body structures and genetic evidence. All of these types of evidence support the hypothesis that modern whales evolved from hoofed mammals called anthracotheres that lived on land. Evolutionary relationships are inferred based on evidence from the fossil record. They are also inferred from similarities in the bodies of living organisms, similarities between living and fossilized organisms, and similarities among the embryos of different types of organisms. Recently, evolutionary relationships have also been studied at the genetic and molecular level. Scientists infer that the more similar species are at any level, the more closely related they are to each other. The anatomy of an organism is its body's structure and its structural traits. Related organisms have a similar anatomy. For example, the body structures of insects are more like those of other insects than those of birds. Consider a structural trait such as feathers. It was once accepted that only birds had feathers. Soft, fluffy feathers provide insulation. Long, sleeker feathers enable flight. But recent fossil discoveries reveal short structures in certain dinosaur fossils that look similar to certain modern bird feathers. Scientists have identified these structures as feathers. These feathers provide evidence that dinosaurs and birds are more closely related to each other than was once thought. Many four-legged organisms have similar leg structures that carry out similar functions. Similarities in anatomy can indicate evolutionary relationships, but they are not always the result of a close relationship. Some body structures evolved at different times. Some structures with similar functions also evolved in different species. Think about the fins of whales and fish. The fins help both animals move in water, but they developed along very different evolutionary paths. So too did the wings in birds, bats, and insects. The presence and function of wings does not indicate a close evolutionary relationship between these groups of organisms because the anatomy of their wings differs so much. The study of the development of unborn or unhatched organisms is called embryology. Embryos undergo many changes as they grow and develop. Scientists compare the embryo development of different species to look for similar patterns and structures. Based on research and observation, scientists infer that such similarities come from an ancestor that the species have in common. For example, at some time during development, all animals with backbones have a tail. This observation suggests that all animals with a backbone have a common ancestor. Gill slits are another example of a structure that is present in the early embryos of several animal species. For example, chicken embryos and human embryos both have a stage in which they have slits in their necks that are similar to the gill slits of fish. The tissues that make up these gill slits develop further to become parts of the jaw, ears, and neck. Based on this and other evidence, scientists infer that chickens and humans share a common ancestor with fish. Studies of embryo development are not limited to living species. Some fossilized embryos have been found. Scientists use observation from these embryos as evidence to explain the universal process of embryo development.